The laughter came sharp and metallic, echoing against the marble walls like a coin spinning on a glass table. He didn't even look at her when he said it. He simply slid the old parchment across the dining table, leaned back in his velvet chair, and smirked. "Translate this and my salary is yours." The other guests chuckled into their crystal glasses. The maid stood there, small and silent, her hands still damp from washing imported porcelain plates worth more than her monthly pay. And then, she did. "Before we go further, if you believe every story hides a lesson waiting to be uncovered, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Humanity Stories. Your support keeps these moments alive." The mansion glowed under chandeliers the size of small galaxies. Outside, rain pressed softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the city lights into trembling streaks of gold. Inside, the air smelled of expensive cologne and polished wood. He was a self-made millionaire, at least that's what the magazines called him. At 48, his silver-threaded hair and tailored navy suit were symbols of conquest. He wore confidence like armor. The guests orbiting him tonight were investors, politicians, collectors of rare things. He collected people too, especially the kind who reminded him how far he had risen. She had arrived at the mansion 3 months earlier. No one asked many questions. She was simply the maid. 26 years old, with dark hair always tied into a modest bun, hands rough from detergent and winter cold. She moved quietly, eyes lowered, absorbing conversations in languages most of the staff did not understand. At night, in her small attic room with a single narrow window, she would unfold an old notebook and write under the dim yellow bulb. No one knew she had once stood in lecture halls lined with ancient stone, translating manuscripts older than the country she now cleaned floors in. The parchment he had slid toward her that evening was framed in gold. A rare acquisition, he had boasted earlier. An undeciphered fragment bought at auction for a sum that made even his wealthy friends whistle in admiration. He believed it was written in a lost dialect of Aramaic, perhaps even older. Scholars had failed. Universities had offered opinions but no certainty. It was his prized mystery. When he tossed it to her, it wasn't curiosity. It was cruelty disguised as entertainment. The room had grown still when she picked it up. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from recognition. The ink, faded but deliberate. The spacing between symbols. The slight tilt in the final characters of each line. Her heart began to pound in her chest so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. For a brief second, the attic room flashed before her eyes. The university courtyard. Her father's proud smile on graduation day. Then the accident. The hospital bills. The scholarships lost. The visa expiring. The choices that followed. She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and began to speak. Her voice was soft, but it carried. The translation flowed from her lips with steady clarity. It wasn't a shopping list or a prayer. It was a letter. A letter from a scholar to his daughter, written centuries ago. It spoke of exile, of losing status and homeland, of how knowledge was a fire that must be protected, even when the world tried to reduce you to ashes. The room shifted as she continued, as though the walls themselves were leaning closer. The millionaire's smile faded first. Then his posture stiffened. The guests stopped swirling their drinks. One of the investors leaned forward, eyes wide. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't improvising. She was explaining grammatical structures, the evolution of certain symbols, the historical context of a particular phrase. The letter, once a decorative trophy, suddenly became alive, intimate, human, painfully relevant. When she finished, silence swallowed the room whole. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not the uniform, not the lowered gaze, but the mind standing in front of him. Something inside him cracked, not dramatically, not publicly, but enough for his breath to catch. He asked how she knew. She didn't answer with defiance. She simply explained, calmly, that she had specialized in ancient Semitic languages before life rearranged her path. There was no bitterness in her tone. No accusation. Just quiet fact. Rain continued tapping against the glass, but now it sounded different, less like background noise and more like applause too gentle to interrupt. He reached for his wallet at first, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of pride. But money suddenly felt small in that vast dining room. The wager he had made in arrogance now seemed childish. His annual salary, once a symbol of dominance, lay exposed as a trivial prize compared to what she had just revealed. He offered her a position the next morning, not as a maid, but as a consultant for his private collection. The words tasted unfamiliar to him. Humility often does. She didn't respond immediately. That was the part that unsettled him most. She asked for time. That night, back in her attic room, she sat by the small window and watched the rain turn into mist over the sleeping city. The notebook lay open beside her. For months she had swallowed the weight of silence. Tonight, it felt lighter. The mansion looked different the next day. The marble floors were the same, the chandeliers just as bright, but something invisible had shifted. He walked more slowly, spoke more thoughtfully, and when he looked at her, there was no trace of mockery, only curiosity, perhaps even respect. Before we reach the end, I want you to comment below with one word that describes how this moment made you feel. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations don't happen in boardrooms or on stages. They happen in quiet realizations. In the space between laughter and silence. If this story stirred something inside you, hope, reflection, even discomfort, engage with it. Like, share, or leave your thoughts. Stories like this live through the feelings they awaken.